Okay. Peace and love. Peace and love. Salute. Doing another quick test run as to how to escape corporate America and how not to be used and abused and discarded like I was in corporate America. See, once upon a time, I worked as a project manager and a business analyst for a Fortune 500 company. I'm not going to name what specific company that was, but I was reached out to by one of the directors who also happened to be a manager for the clients which we served. So I was reached out to by the implementation partner, essentially servicing a Fortune 500 client out of Houston, and they had several projects going on. The way it works is these companies have various partners who are essentially implementation partners. For instance, like Deloitte and so others, and they bid for contracts and jobs and position various resources or employees in different positions as, managers and architects and scrum masters, business analysts, testers, and all sorts of things. And one of the directors reached out to me to come on board as a business analyst for a specific project integrating artificial intelligence with a lot of their fleets and systems, right? Their computing systems. So it took a while, went through the interviews and accepted the job, came on board, went through the learning process to studied all the documents and artifacts to quickly understand the company and how it operates and all of that. Shortly after, the same director approached me and asked me if, scheduled a lunch, mind you, and asked me if I would be open to, she said she needed help with a project, a specific project. So this was a very high visibility project, which the company, the implementation partner, I was hired by, service they were providing to the Fortune 500 company, and this was amongst other projects, but this was a very high visibility project, essentially migrating a lot of their application program interfaces, over 300, from on-prem to cloud, and which in hindsight, I knew it was a tedious project, but I didn't know exactly how tedious it was, just sort of assuming that being that the project had already started and it wasn't in its discovery phase, so there was momentum, the ball was already rolling. I figured that, I'll take on the project and do her a favor, so to say, right? If you want to call that a favor. So we had lunch, and also to mention, I was already getting a lot of hate and envy from a lot of the senior management and managers, project managers on the team that I was on, right? Because that's just how corporate America works. Sometimes you come on board and people begin to feel threatened, and they feel as though you're there to, you'll eventually take their position, because, when people come on board and they work these jobs for quite a while, after a while the zeal or the excitement isn't there anymore, or their performance starts to lackluster. So when new people come on board, sometimes they see them as a competition or as a threat, right? So, and I didn't really know, what to expect. I knew it was a migration project. Long story short, I accepted the project. I was moved to a different department, working with the Enterprise Service Bus. and as a project manager overseeing the migration of the application program interfaces, the APIs. Now, coming on board, 4 project managers, including the director who approached me and for the job, had failed at this position, right? And it was taking me a little while to kind of understand why they were all dropping off out of this position, because it was very tedious. I mean, this company supports in its sector, this company, without giving off too much, in the sector this company operates in, it's the largest, it's the biggest sector in the world, and it services the whole of the US and parts of Canada as well. Obviously, it has competitors, but by a long shot, it's the largest in its sector. So the goal was to migrate over 300 application APIs, which also had a lot of dependencies. These APIs have a lot of dependencies, so there's a lot of logistics that goes into this stuff, a lot of planning and scheduling and stakeholder management, dealing with a lot of the the business analysts as their requirement gathering, and just a whole lot, reporting to higher management, including the VP, because as I mentioned, it's a very high visibility project. And coming on board, I soon realized that there was a lot of people were avoiding responsibility and passing on work to the manager on the implementation partner, on the implementation, to the management on the implementation team. Because in corporate America, a lot of times when you're a contractor, you're often, they try to make it seem as though they treat you as an equal, but you're often seen as some sort of a second-class citizen, right? And even other contractors who may be direct hires with the company itself will see themselves, or often act as though they're more superior to you because you're working with another, because you're not directly employed by the company. So essentially, you're a contractor through a third party, so to say. So I found this the project manager on the company side, who was also a contractor, passing on a lot of work to me, which eventually we would find out that he was job stacking, right? He worked remotely, so he would come on site to the Houston headquarters from time to time, but primarily he worked remote, and he was always acting as trying to be the boss and boss people around and passing on his work, and always absent at meetings and always making excuses. And it worked for a while, but the senior management and directors quickly caught on and didn't renew his contract after the deployment had happened, right? But I found myself saying yes to a lot of things, taking on a lot of work, taking full responsibility for the weekly status reports and the monthly status reviews, and being excluded from a lot of meetings. And this is also not to mention being a so-called black person in corporate America, and just dealing with a lot of the subtle racism and isms, all the isms and schisms that go on, and all the political stuff that happens in these environments. But I found that people were often taking my work and excluding excluding me from meetings and then passing it on to higher management. You get compensated, fairly well in corporate America, depending on what you negotiate, obviously. But when you're dealing with something like IT, where oftentimes your development team, your dev team is offshore, you're spending a lot of long nights as well, especially on deployment nights, which deployments can happen as often as possible if there are bug fixes or things need to be implemented and deployed. So you find yourself spending a lot of additional time and a lot of additional hours. And when you're not a contractor who can bill for extra time, you just find that what your salary is, what you're expecting to receive, you make that, but you're paying for it in so many ways, in blood, if I should say. You're paying with your health, you're paying with your time with your family, you're paying in so many different ways, and it really, in the end, it doesn't amount to what you're expected to be paid. So I say this to say that the same amount of energy, the same amount of discipline that it requires to work for corporate, right, to work for these companies, if you put that same amount of energy and discipline and stay on your routine and your schedule your work, wake up on time, be disciplined, go to the gym, get to work when you need to, get into your office, turn off your phone, just do everything that you would normally do when you have a boss overseeing you, or when you're being micromanaged, or when you're working on projects, high visibility projects, and projects where you're leading boardrooms and big teams, and if you take that same energy and you put it into yourself, into your project, into something that you're passionate about, or it could be something you're passionate about, not always, but preferably, or something, or a solution that you found to other people's problems, and you do that for about 2 to 3 to 4 years, 5 years, it's hard not to come out on the other side successful. Because a lot of work that we do in corporate America, there is no equity in the long run. You do all this work, you develop a lot of things, and you problem solve, and you create so much value for the company. And yeah, they pay you well, but whatever they're paying you, believe it, you better believe that they're making times 10 off of you, anywhere, if not more. And they own the intellectual property. They continue to reap the benefits of it long after you're gone and retired, and even pass it on to their children, or their children's children. So essentially, you're building other people's dreams, which there's nothing wrong with that if you're coming in as an apprentice, or to learn, or to gain the experience. But through that process, you should be preparing to pivot into your own thing that you can build and have equity in, and have residual equity, residual pay coming in, right? So that's my spiel for the day. That's mostly what I wanted to cover, because I know a lot of people, you don't see corporate America as a dead-end job until you're in, but it can very easily become a dead-end job where you become a wage slave very easily, and then you start wanting to escape. Make sure that from 9 to 5, the work that you do it well, you earn, and then in the evenings from 6 to 11 or 12, you're putting in some effort into building something that you can retire on. Pensions are good, and 401ks and all that, and your investments, but build something in your discretionary time that you can live off of, and that you can develop and expound on, and possibly pass on down to your children down the line. Peace and love. Ken Aguinobi signing out.